Kitsap Sun's editorial board, and we're talking with Deborah Simon, who's a candidate for District 5, North Kitsap School Board. And since your opponent isn't here, we're just going to spend some time getting to know you and ask a couple of questions. But the first thing I'd ask you is take 2 minutes or so and tell us who you are, where you're from, and why you're interested in doing this.
Sure. About 40 or so years ago, I decided to go into either education or the law. And as it turned out, I got to do both. I graduated from California State University Fullerton with a bachelor's degree in liberal studies and a teaching credential. And I proceeded to teach for about 7 or 8 years. But it didn't take long for me to realize as a young teacher that I had to supplement my income in the summer. So I signed up with a lot of different temporary agencies and did office work, filled in for people on leave and on vacation and whatnot. And one day I got this call from one of those temporary agencies, and the woman said, "We have this position that's open. Again, it just keeps coming open, and we thought maybe you would be interested. It's a legal assistant with an in-house counsel in a business brokerage, and he's a bit of a curmudgeon, and he kind of scares the people that are there, and they don't stay very long. Some of them stay 3 or 4 days. Anyway, would you like it?" She knew me well, because all I heard was legal. And I said, "Sure, when, where?" And as it turns out, that was one of your life-changing positions. For other reasons, I had to go on a hiatus from teaching not long after I started there, and I worked there full-time. Yes, he was a curmudgeon, but he just needed someone who understood him, somebody who could interpret for him and verbally and intellectually spar with him. And then very soon after I got there, the paralegal left, so I took over her position too, and it became the attorney and me and an outside counsel, and I learned so much. So much law, so many different aspects of corporate law and financial law. And then when I left, one of the outside attorneys took me out to lunch and said, "Here's my card. If you ever need me, call me." So I went to a totally different industry, same setup, the in-house counsel and me. And while I was there, they went public. So that was a completely different experience. I did a lot of human resources law. I actually helped them become a government contractor. I did more litigation law, corporate governance. And then I came up here to Washington. I had some family up here, and I went back to teaching for a couple of years, but then I had kids, and all bets were off, everything changed. And we always wanted our kids to grow up in a neighborhood, in a place they belonged, where they went to school with the people that were next door, their friends. It just didn't work out. Our youngest had a wonderful year at kindergarten year at Breidablick Elementary. And we subsequently moved schools after that, but it became evident that she was going to need some ongoing accommodation. And we worked with the teachers, we worked with the principal, we worked with the counselor, sat down with district administrators, the superintendent, and even addressed the school board. But there just wasn't a place for that accommodation. The program was set up so that she couldn't benefit from it because of her age, and the school district at that time didn't want to change the policy, so she is now homeschooled, but I stayed involved. I actually got more involved for 2 reasons. First reason was that education is what I do, and I didn't want to just help our child. I wanted to help others because I had the background and the experience. And the second is, I believe in North Kitsap School District. I think that it is perfectly situated and has so much potential to be so much more than it is. So I spent the last 3 years working with the district. I've been on the Community Financial Advisory Committee, the Highly Capable Committee. I've worked and addressed the school board and the administration on different subjects. I've worked with parents and facilitators in North Kitsap and other local school districts, all to the point of, let's make this school district everything it can be. And that's why I'm pursuing the school board at this time.
What was the policy? And you don't need to tell the entire story, but you said there was a policy that conflicted with what you were trying to do.
It's actually still in place.
Uh-huh.
She is what would be considered highly capable,
Uh-huh.
maybe highly capable. So there just wasn't a place for a child first grade doing fourth grade work. And we tried to get that accommodated in the classroom, and it really wasn't their fault. It's just that the policy wasn't there, and it still isn't. I don't think they start until third grade.
Third grade.
Yeah,
Okay. And that's your oldest child?
that's the oldest.
Okay.
She's turning 9 tomorrow.
And are your other children in North Kitsap School? Do they?
I have a
also-
6-year-old who we spent the last year trying to find out how to help her. And we've been told by a couple of professionals, wait, let's get an IEP in place. So at this time, she's not anywhere.
Tell us a little bit more about your committee work that you've done. What you said you spent 3 years kind of touching some different things within the district. What are the things that you see that you think this is what I'm really good at and what I'm drawn to, and that you would try to take over or kind of take to the board from your experience the last couple of years?
It was interesting because my husband and I talked about it 3 years ago, and he said, you know, if you really want to help, then you go help with the finances, because that's really where the heartbeat is. And I did. I'm very glad I did. We've had 3 different financial directors since I've been there, which is difficult. It's a community financial advisory committee. It's not a board committee. So it's run by the financial director, and it advises the director, who then advises the superintendent, who then advises the board. It has not met yet this year. It met last year less frequently than it met the previous year. And I've had people ask me, what do you do on that committee? And I've tried to tell them what I think it does, but it's not a very refined committee at this point. I think it could be so much more because, for example, there's a gentleman on the committee who has never had children in the district and has tried to get involved. So there's a completely different set of eyes that are on the finances on that committee. I would like to see that much more used. I would like to see the committee itself grow, but be used, because it's not growing because it's not being used. People see that. Why am I here? Because it's not useful. I think I bring a lot to that table because I've been in the business brokerage firms. I've been with the boards and the executives, the CFO and the attorney, and I worked very closely when the second company I was a paralegal at went public. There were a lot of issues involved with that transition. I think I bring a lot to that table. The highly capable committee, I wonder how that's being used. I hope there's a change now with the director for the highly capable. I hope that that gets used more. I know that the plan says that it is used more than it actually is. I know that people are very passionate about that particular committee.
When you say not used, are you meaning they're not even meeting, or the things they suggest are not acted upon?
Both.
It sounds like the finance committee is not even meeting as regularly.
It has not met this year. And like I said, this is our 3rd new finance director, so things change. It was set up, the finance committee was actually set up by a couple of finance directors ago, and she used it quite a bit. It's almost like you inherit that as you go along. If you get to a new position, you inherit the committee. So you want to use it, but it isn't yours. And I know there's that aspect. When I say used, I think I mean that their opinion is taken into account and not necessarily acted on, but taken seriously. And I think a lot of community members feel that, not just on the committee, that their opinions aren't being taken seriously.
Do you think that applies to not just those 2 issues, but generally? Do you think parents are feeling that way?
Absolutely. I have had parent after parent tell me that I'm giving up. I'm going away because they don't care what I think.
What's your strategy? If you're sitting on the school district board, what's your strategy to address that?
I think the very first thing you have to do is realize that nobody is going to tell you anything if they don't think you care, and if they don't think that you're going to take what they say to heart. So the very first step is that the district has to back up and change the way that it transmits its sincerity. It says it sincerely wants to hear from people, and it goes out and asks people what they think. But the people I talk with don't think that they really want to know. I hope that there's a way to repair that. I think that's the first step. You have to repair that particular relationship, and then you start asking questions openly. You don't go out with a script in mind. You don't say, look, we need to change things. How do you think we need to change things? You say, how do you feel about it? You go out with open-ended questions, with open arms, and a sincerity that says, yes, I want to know what you have to say. And then you use what they have to say.
May I ask, what do you think that comes from? Why is it set that way? What do you think that comes from that separates that different?
I am going to say that I have been told by so many people that it generates from the superintendent's office. They don't think that the superintendent wants to hear from them, will let go of the reins enough for the administrators to act and do their job. That particular relationship between the school board and the superintendent, that is key. That is employer and employee. And I worked long enough in corporate America to know what happens when that's out of balance. And right now it's out of balance. And it cascades to not just those two parties, but to the customers or the stakeholders in this case, that employee serves on behalf of the employer.
Have you seen specific issues where the district has taken and made a decision that maybe illustrates exactly what you're talking about here? Parents clearly asking for something that goes the opposite way or just is ignored.
I've recently heard from a parent who sees the special education in general being eroded to the point that her child's safety was at stake. She has taken him out. And that's what I hear over and over again. Okay, why are you cutting this program? Oh, it's money. Why are you cutting this program? It's money. And yes, we went through an economic downturn, but it isn't the responsibility to cut and say it's money, 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 so much as to say, okay, what can we do that you think isn't going to hurt as much? For example, arts, music.
Well, and that was one that did come up a few years ago with the band programs and the music programs, and then the sports, how the district did make it, or the school board did make a decision that we are going to make sure we offer this and not charge. One thing that I've heard people say about North Kitsap is one of the threats is having Central Kitsap and Bainbridge right next door with both strong schools. The threat of people transferring to those districts. If you're in the school board, you're dealing with finances, obviously, dealing with the decision on special ed, music, these other things. What do you think the best way the district positions itself to hold on to those families? What should they do? What should be at the top of that priority list if you're sitting in that?
The top of the priority list is finding out what people want. What do they need? It's not the metrics. It's not 100% of so-and-so reading. It's not 100% of this happening. It's making people, it's listening to the parents and giving them the ability to put their kids in a place that they know their needs are going to be met. That's the first thing. People transferring out of the district is an issue. I think even more of an issue are people who are opting out completely. There are people who are homeschooling. I know a family who moved to the area and decided, I'm going to homeschool, and didn't even look at what was available in the district simply because of the word of mouth. There are declarations of intent that are filed for homeschoolers. The homeschoolers don't have to answer your questions, but it doesn't hurt to ask. What is it that is happening that's making you choose that? Is there something that would help us for somebody else, another family? Not a threatening type of question, but a true, sincere, what can we do?
As someone who's seen the financial part of the district over the last couple of years, can the district afford to offer more alternatives? It seems like that's what you're getting at, is that there need to be more alternatives for families. And
yes.
I mean, this is no question part of our state's dilemma right now.
Yeah.
Do you think there is the money to offer some very specific things like what you're talking about?
I think there is. I can only go by what I see in the budget as an outsider and as a member of the Community Financial Advisory Committee. Yes, there is something there. It's just a matter of where your priorities are. We closed Spectrum. I had a chance to substitute at Spectrum for a couple days. It was a fantastic school. The kids who were there were doing so much for themselves, and that's gone. The PAL program, the Parent Assisted Learning, which is the homeschoolers at the district, has been slashed. I mean, people have just left in droves, whether that's because it moved from Hallsbow to Kingston or because people didn't see the need to go to homeschool through the district when they got more out of it just homeschooling themselves. I don't know. I do know a couple of people who worked with PAL, and they were dismayed at the utter disregard that they got as a special program. I think alternative education needs to start from kindergarten, not 9th grade. I think that there are options out there if you put your priorities there.
What is your position on charter schools?
Parents, if their needs are not met, are going to exercise their rights. In this state, there are rights to find choices for their children. Right now, one of those choices was the Charter School Initiative, having since been ruled unconstitutional based on case law. I know enough about the law to agree with that. Case law, whether it's in 1801 or 1999, is case law. And in the United States, we define laws through case law. If charter schools are going to work, they need to conform to the laws. And in our state, our laws say common schools. I would say that charter schools have the potential for helping meet specific needs like STEM, but they need to be governed by the people and not just for them.
But so, with that being said, which I'm glad you ended up saying that, if the issue is of Board of Education and districts and Board of Directors not listening to the consumers, you know, what would be the balance, like you said, having that option? Because like even looking at this and hearing you say that, you know, parents are leaving, the school district is at under 80% reading, definitely under 80% math, and then in writing, you know, not even close to the 80% between 3rd and 4th, 5th grades. Do you think it's what's being taught in that district that's making everybody say, look, I'm done because the children are not learning, or it's just the information, like you said at the beginning, is not just being heard from the parents? It's not what's being taught, I think it's how. The teachers, I know several teachers, they're doing their best. I've been in the classroom and I know how difficult it is to teach around so many different requirements, state and local. But I think you're right. I think it's the fact that parents don't feel like their child's needs and their opinion of their child's needs are being listened to. Parents know their children best, whether they're trained in education or not.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was going to elaborate just on that, the statement you just made, the not being listened to. Do you think that happens on a classroom, building level, or is that district office level? Good question. I think a lot of it stems from the fact that there's a practice in the district of decentralization. We're not a large district comparatively, but buildings make their own policies. And when you have buildings that are making their own policies, there's something lost in the translation. You have, for example, you have highly capable that is done on a building level. That's something that should be centralized, because you don't want to have one building do something better than another building and then have parents say, well, I'm not getting what I need, so I'm going to try to go to this school. That's where you get the uneven class sizes. I think a lot of it stems from a decentralization, that
while it sounds like it's a better idea, I think in practice it doesn't work.
Talking about it seems like you're kind of passionate about some of these alternative education or offering options. What do you think, if they're needing to find money to do this, and the McCleary, the things that are coming through that are not necessarily directed at those, that's going to be what districts kind of suss through in the coming years. What from your perspective, what is there an overemphasis on? What is there too much money being spent on that would free up some of these things that you're trying to talk about?
Again, I'm going to know more from an insider's point of view. Yes, McCleary is going to be in buckets. And for example, all-day kindergarten, that's a bucket that has mostly, I think almost all the schools in the district can have all-day kindergarten funded. To a certain extent, it's not fully funded. But when that happened, half-day kindergarten left. That's an example of not listening to the parents. They wanted the option of going all day without having to pay this $7,000 we did, but now they can't go to half day. So when the money comes in a bucket, that frees up that amount. Okay, now we can fund full day. We're free with what we were using before. Let's see where we can put that people want to have it. Oh, people want half day. Well, let's keep half day then. Things like funding the sport fees that were done. People wanted that. That was a lot of money. I heard some people say that was wonderful, but what about this other? They felt like their need wasn't listened to. I think what happens when you get fully funded education somewhere down the line, then you have things like levies that are opened up for specific local desires and needs. That's where you put that money.
How do you, and maybe this is just kind of drawing on your own personal experience and what you've done in your career and such, when you said just a second ago, the sports people are happy, but the music people aren't happy. Mm-hmm. When you're in a school district board member seat, those people are both coming to you.
Yep.
How have you done that in the past? What in your personality puts you in a space that I can do that decision?
I did litigation. I had the second attorney I worked for sent me up. I was in Southern California. He put me on a plane and put me to Northern California, one of our locations, and said, you need to go up there and you need to interview this person who, these people who are going to testify against or for us in this sexual harassment suit. So I sat down and I interviewed these people, and I'll tell you that was pretty contentious interviews. But what those people wanted is the exact same thing the first attorney that I worked for wanted. Someone who'd listen. Someone who would sit there and make that person know that right now you're all I care about. You're the one that I'm listening to. I don't think that any logical parent, I think I'm logical, will say, okay, well, you have to do what I want. This is what I want, when they think that you've actually heard them. They're going to say, okay, this is not possible, everything is not possible, but I know that they have in their back pocket, in the back of their mind, they know what I said, and I believe that they sincerely listened, so when it's possible, that's something that's going to come around. I think that's probably the best example.
What's your opinion on the value of standardized testing?
Standardized anything has to be taken with a grain of salt. I'm not sure I know any parent who has more than one child who didn't say, well, this child walked when they were such and so age. Why are you not walking? Is there something wrong with you? But then we come to realize, you know what, they're going to walk. Eventually, they're going to walk. They're not going to go to college not walking. Standardized testing is something that is able to uncover a specific thing. When you try to make it more than what that narrow band is, that's where you get the problems. Are you testing for proficiency? Okay, that's usually a test like a standardized test. Do you want to know how to help that teacher change their instruction to meet that kid's needs before that kid graduates their class. That's a totally different test. You have to know what you're testing and why you're testing and make sure that you're using the right instrument.
Do you think that instrument can be applied statewide, nationwide?
I think if that's what you want to have happen and you realize that that's what you're going to get out of it, then yes, it can. But you have to look at it from a human perspective. Quantitative assessments are very limited when it comes to a qualitative issue like education. You know, what's your goal? That person learns how to add, or that person is able to take that skill and succeed in life? Very different things.
Do you think, I guess go back a little bit, do you think now is time for the board to maybe have parents?
Oh yes. I'm not sure that anybody would disagree with the fact that if I liked the way things were right now, I wouldn't run. So it comes naturally when somebody is running for a seat that on the school board that they haven't had before. They don't like the way things are now and want to see that change and get better. So yes, I think that's very important. I think the board needs a new perspective.
What do you think is a fair way to evaluate teachers?
That goes back to the standardized testing.
Yeah, similar.
You have to ask yourself, what do you expect a teacher to do? Do you expect a teacher to make kids smart? That is very different from the teacher is there to teach. If the teacher is there to teach, then how are you going to evaluate that teaching? You can teach until, I've done this many times with my own kids and many classrooms, you can teach until you're blue in the face, but you can't make somebody learn. So evaluating a teacher on the fact that somebody learns is not evaluating them on their job if you consider their job to be teaching. Teaching is, again, it's qualitative. It's where you sit down like the attorney used to do when I was working as a paralegal. Okay, this is the way I need you to do this job. I need you to start doing this, I need you to do this, and I need you to do this. Let's sit down in 6 months and see how close are you on those things.
And that would be the principal's job. Is that?
I think so, yeah, I do. And honestly, I think it's the same thing that the school board does with the superintendent. The school board doesn't say, we need, although that's in contention right now, we need 100% of third graders to read or you're not doing your job. I don't think you do that with teachers either. I think it's qualitative and not quantitative.
Do you think teachers are paid enough to attract the people that need to do that job?
No. Like I said when I first started talking, I did that job. And, you know, they're not. They're not. You want somebody who wants to be there, yes. But you don't want somebody who wants to be there but can't because they're not getting the money that they need to be there.
So with that said, you know in finances, what needs to change to get that? Because I hear everybody say about going up on money, but then there has to be something that's stopping it. Because it's happening. What needs to change from a financial standpoint, do you think, to say, hey, we can make this happen?
Right now, our teachers are not happy. They showed up at the last school board meeting and said, look, we approved a 1-year contract because this is not sufficient. That's pretty different than what's been happening. There is some tension going on to the point of we need to deal with this. Whether that's changing the collective bargaining structure or changing the structure entirely with the state legislature saying, well, we're just going to take that away from you. That's a possibility. Again, I'm on the outside and I can't be in those collective bargaining situations. I do know what it's like though, because I've been in mediation where you're sitting in a room and somebody comes to you and you tell them what you want and they go to another room and it's not even the people who are actually bargaining. It's their attorneys or it's their representatives. Maybe that needs to change. I think, honestly, the sincerity needs to change. I think the teachers need to know that the school board knows that something has to give. These teachers need value from their job. And again, I'll go back to the fact that I don't think a logical adult is going to say, well, you said that you valued me, so give me 6 figures. I don't think they're going to do that. Sorry?
This is sort of above your pay grade, but you seem to be a freewheeling person here.
Sure.
We've had President of UW here, we've had President of the college here. Both of them mentioned in passing the deplorable fact that high percentage of incoming students need remedial, or what they used to call remedial in the unbenighted days, English and math. Why is that?
It's primarily because when you and I went to kindergarten, we didn't have to do what the kindergartners do right now. When you and I went to kindergarten, we had naps, and we learned our colors. My kids went into kindergarten. Now, it was easier for them, but for other kids, it's not so much easy. They have to go in almost learning how to read. They know some of the letters, they assume, through whether it's preschool or whatnot, or your parents taught you how to do it. But when they hit kindergarten, they're going 100 miles an hour. So yeah, there's gonna be a lot more remedial need. And what happens is you get a kid in there who doesn't know how to do that, and then the next year they still don't know how to do that, but now they don't know how to do the next step, and the gap gets wider and wider. Whether that's solved through a Head Start program, where there's more emphasis put on learning earlier, helping the kids to learn earlier, or maybe just telling the parents. I don't know a whole lot of parents who know that the kid going into kindergarten has to know 3 or 4 words, how to read 3 or 4 words. If they knew that, they might change the way that they help that child when they're growing up. I think that's the biggest reason why the remedial is becoming more of an issue.
Lack of early learning.
Lack of early learning. It's standards being pushed further down in the grades. You know, if you have to teach, if people have to graduate high school knowing calculus, I barely graduated knowing algebra. So you're going to have to push that further down the line so that by the time they get to high school, they're learning calculus. Does that make sense?
Well, I know it's very difficult to test those that do receive early learning versus those that don't. But there's been a couple of very key studies recently that show that not only do the early learning kids, they do better maybe in 1st grade, but by 3rd grade, they actually can be surpassed by those that didn't receive any early learning at all.
And you know, that's a lot of that too comes along with everything evens out in 3rd grade. And what happens, they've looked into some of that, and that's not all of it, but they've looked into some of it and seen that by the time, if a child goes in, for example, into kindergarten knowing how to read and at maybe a 1st grade level, and they are put in that classroom with others who are reading at a kindergarten level, well, they are no longer reading at a 1st grade level. So they go to 2nd grade, and now they're reading at a 2nd grade level when they could even maybe still possibly read at a 3rd or 4th grade level. So by the time they get to 3rd grade, it's, well, I'm just going to do what everyone else does because I'm not going to be able to do what I really can do, so I'm just going to stop doing that. And that's not all of them. There definitely are some that are later learners, later bloomers. Those are your visual learners who they don't bloom until sometimes they're in high school. You know, some of us graduate from high school going, oh, wait, I really am smart. I can do this because I didn't catch on until later.
So that goes to the point where I think you said your daughter went through that as well. Because my son now with kindergarten, he comes from Head Start. And I mean, the teacher, she's going through it because he's there. It's like 2 other children that are way ahead. And they go out, she has to let them go outside and try to keep them ahead because they get bored. Do you think, because she said, she made a comment to me, his teacher was, I wasn't prepared for this coming in. So do you think, I guess to go back to David's thing, do you think that principals are preparing, you know, to like, all right, you may have some that are ahead, Or do you think that, like, it's just the way it is? As far as what you learned in college to teach kindergarten and that, that's it, just stick to
For
that.
the ones that are being prepared for the ones who are ahead, or that is the question. That's an issue that we went through, and we're still going through. And other parents that I know have these kids going into kindergarten reading at a 4th grade level. By the time they go into 1st grade, there's no place for them.
Right.
They're peerless, and the gap gets wider and wider the older they get. That's a very key reason why I think that highly capable was made basic education, because these kids are different learners. They're not just smarter, they're different. And to provide for them what they need is the same as providing for the remedial help that others need. And in some cases, there's both. They're remedial on one part, and they're highly capable on another part. That's where the alternative education comes in.
I gotta ask this question.
Go.
Do you think that the Board of Ed, well, I'm not the Board of Ed, but the board should be looking at what private schools do?
Oh yeah. Is there any industry where the CEO doesn't peek next door at their competitors? Absolutely. Now, do they have to do that to succeed? Not necessarily, but they should know what's being done. Yes, absolutely.
Well, great. No,
I love the energy.
that was good. That was a good. How about this? I think we've asked the questions we want to ask. If there's anything we didn't touch on, here's your chance.
Oh, that's a wide open question.
Yeah. I don't make it too wide open, but or anything you'd like to close with that maybe we didn't get to ask you about that you want us to know.
I guess what I would say is there definitely is a difference between me and my opponent. And it's not so much about personality as it is who people think is better qualified. And I am not running for a personal reason. This is not me. This is me standing up, past teachers saying, look, I think this could be better. Let's try and make this better. If you don't think I'm right and you think I wouldn't be better, then don't vote for me. But do it because you know, because you're informed. And do it because you choose to vote and not just, well, my vote doesn't matter. So I think that's probably what I would say. And that ties into the fact that I think civics is something that is so on the cusp of real world experience. If we could get our kids involved, then they wouldn't grow up thinking that voting didn't matter. I will never, ever forget my kindergarten year because we had a mock election, believe it or not, in kindergarten. I will never forget that. I don't know who ran, I don't know who won, I don't know if we even voted for who was running, but I'll never forget it, and today I vote.
You have civics now in North Kitsap.
We do.
You have a requirement now.
We do. And we just adopted a curriculum to go with that. I would love to teach physics over algebra any day. You get kids, if somebody comes up to you and says, well, why am I doing this? Civics gives you the answer. Now, why are you learning algebra? That one's a little harder to answer. So yeah, we do. We just, I think it was just it's one credit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We appreciated that.
You're welcome.